The story I'll be reviewing today is kind of a battle royale, but not really. Technically, there's only two sides in the conflict: the wholesome Japanese high school student protagonists, and the Nazi demons. That being said, the way the incentive system is set up for the Nazi demons encourages them to kill each other, turning things into a bit of a free-for-all. Oh, also, our heroes can be a wee bit stubborn and argumentative, so they beat the living daylights out of each other too. I guess really you could say this story is all about bad teamwork and backstabbing. Alternately, you could also describe it as Hellsing meets Fate Stay Night, as it has copious amounts of gore and undead Nazis, and a Japanese high school student gets involved in magical battle royale plot. Regardless, it's entertaining. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Dies Irae Amantes Amentes. So here's the general gist of the plot for Dies Irae. During the Second World War, Nazis dabbled with the occult and managed to create some superhuman creatures who could absorb the souls of the dead to fuel their powers. Said superhumans, or perhaps it would be more accurate to label them as demons, formed Longinus Dreisen Orden, and were supposed to help Germany with the war effort. Despite having these demons though, the Germans still lost the war, because said demons were just as happy to eat the souls of dead Germans as they were Allied troops. Yeah, that experiment wasn't too successful. Anyways, at the end of the war, the leaders of Longinus Dreisen Orden went off to play in a castle in a different dimension, and the rest of the Nazi demons sort of dispersed. Then we go to present day. The Nazi demons have been promised that if they help bring their leaders back from the play castle, they'll each be granted a wish. All they need to do is sacrifice a horde of souls at 8 spots in a Japanese city, which form the shape of a swastika. Oh, and there needs to be battles for said sacrifices to work. We follow Ren Fuji, a poor sot who has the misfortune of living in said city. He's been granted the questionable honor of being made the playmate for the Nazis, or in other words, he's been given special powers and they train him and then tell him, please fight us so we can do our whole sacrifice ritual thing. The rest of the story is then Ren fighting Nazi demons, and Nazi demons fighting among themselves, because apparently killing each other on swastika points works just fine for activating them. Dies Irae does pretty well by its cast. Protagonist Kun, Ren, is a pretty regular Japanese high school student before the Nazi demons show up, and he's quite fond of his peaceful everyday life. In fact, his driving motivation in most of the routes is to return to said peaceful life. He's stubborn and idealistic, but also quite bright. Then we have Shiro, Ren's best/worst friend, and a complete badass. He's a practical joker with no sense of fear, and despite being an ordinary person, he manages to go toe-to-toe with the Nazi demons. He partners with a smarter female version of himself, Ellie, a carefree hacker with a playful sense of humor. Together, the pair are easily the best characters in the series. As for the heroines, we have childhood friend/comic relief character Kasumi, the innocent angel Mary, who can also turn into a blade, Soul Eater style, Kei, an emo tsundere, and Rei, who has a sharp tongue, a quick wit, and is still generally a damsel in distress. Finally, to fill out the roster of the opposing side, we have a Nazi vampire, a Nazi witch, a Nazi cyborg, Nazi Spider-Man, a Nazi ghoul, a Nazi with both mommy and daddy issues, and a bunch of others I won't mention because spoilers. Despite my rather brief summary here, all the characters in Dies Irae are actually really well fleshed out and have some pretty interesting backstories. Well, other than Nazi Spider-Man. He kind of gets a raw deal. But yeah, other than that, I'm quite impressed by the cast. Hearing Dies Irae is about killing Nazi demons likely gives the impression that it's not that thoughtful a story, but surprisingly, it is. It has quite an interesting discussion of human nature and ethics, exploring topics such as whether to prioritize the lives of the many or the few that are close to you, and looking at not just what should be done, but what you would actually do. In one case, it takes the protagonist from being in the position of moral grandstanding to another character, and then puts him in the same position as that character. Suddenly, his choices become far less clear, and this really drives home the point to the reader. Philosophizing aside, there's still some great action. So yes, if you want to see various superhuman entities outthink and outbash each other in incredible battles, then this will certainly give you your fill. The battles are well thought out, well paced, and have epic background music that pushes them just over the edge into awesome. Actually, I've got to praise the story of Dies Irae too. It is incredibly complex with more depth than almost any other VN I've read. That being said, I've never found it too confusing. As long as you've read the routes in the right order, each one builds on what you learned from the last one, and by the ending of the final route, everything is neatly wrapped up. The epilogue to Ray's route is a perfect way to close the series, and it nails everything it needed to. So you'll notice in the last section I said something about reading the routes in the right order, and to me, this goes into the biggest flaw of this series. There is clearly a correct order to read the character routes, but you're not locked into reading it in a specific order. You're not even really given hints as to the correct order. This is hugely problematic. As an example, Beatrice is a character that is introduced and given backstory in Kei's route and side stories you unlock after completing Kei and Kasumi's route. However, she also appears in Rei's route with no introduction, so if you haven't completed the other two routes, you'll have no idea who she is, and some of the interactions she has won't make any sense. Also, just in terms of progression, some character routes' endings are more climactic, shall we say, than others. So if you read it in the wrong order, you'll likely feel a bit of disappointment getting to later endings. I highly recommend reading it in the following order: Kasumi's route, the werewolf side story, Kei's route, Die Morgendimurang side story, and Verfol and Segen side stories, Mary's route, Omni Vincent Amor side story, Ray's route, Nil Difficile Amantes side story. Other than that, my only real complaint is that the monologues in the story can get a bit long-winded and pretentious. I don't particularly enjoy listening to characters ramble for 5 minutes before finally getting to the point, especially not at the beginning of the story. This is not how to catch your reader's interest and engage them. It's not that they aren't expressing interesting ideas and all, but a bit of conciseness would have helped. Oh, and consistent translating. There's a lot of text in Latin and German, neither of which I speak, and while some of it's translated, not all of it is. I'd rather not have to use Google Translate as I'm reading a visual novel. Dies Irae tells a great story, but it is not for the impatient. I rather suspect many people will find the monologues insufferable, and it is a long story. It took me 75 hours to complete, and looking through Steam reviews, I can see some people spent over double that time. If you can get all the way through though, the payoff is pretty great. So, I would recommend this story, but only if you have sufficient free time and really enjoy a lot of reading. Oh, and also have a reasonable stomach for gore, because there's a lot of that. If you've already read Dies Irae and are looking for something similar, I would recommend Hellsing Ultimate for another fight Nazis monster experience, and Fate Stay Night if you're looking for another battle royale with fantasy fights. Anyways, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the review. Cheers!